the CARES Act and the PPP and the EIDL program. But then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about sort of the political situation, where those programs are now, and then sort of move a little bit beyond that into what's going on in some other areas. And then I want to open it up to your questions. I think it's really, really important that we here at the U.S. Chamber can do what we can to make sure that we're supporting you and your businesses and your chamber at this time. We're all in this together, and we here in Washington are here to help and here to support what you're doing.
Great.
So
thank you.
So the CARES Act passed just about 3 weeks ago now, and has been open for, and the CARES Act has two main programs in there: the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL program. Those are the two big small business programs that are out there that are in this statute. The PPP has been live for coming up on 2 weeks now, or 1 week for independent contractors and some other folks. The EIDL program has been out there a little bit longer. The PPP program is basically a program to get money in the hands of small businesses to continue to pay workers and other expenses like rent, mortgage, utilities, things like that. Congress was really smart with both of these programs in trying to come up with ways to get money out to the private sector to support small businesses, keep them afloat. I think the thinking of Congress was that it's better to have businesses paying paychecks, even for businesses that aren't able to operate, even if employees have to stay home. It's better for those businesses to be paying paychecks than for employees to be getting unemployment checks. So that's really the main focus of the PPP program. The PPP program is something you get from your bank. Even though it's something you get from your bank, it is a 100% guaranteed loan program backed by the federal government. So the risks to banks is much less than any other loan that they write. And therefore the paperwork is a lot less on that. I'm sure that some of you have applied. The application is only 2 pages, doesn't require personal certification over under $200,000. It's a really robust program. The EIDL program is something through SBA. It's sort of like the old disaster relief programs at SBA, but on steroids. Again, Congress did this to try and come up with a way to get money in the hands of businesses really quickly. EIDL covers more things and is less focused on paying payrolls. So I think, again, Congress was smart trying to come up with different ways to address different types of businesses in the small business sector. So that's the good news. The other good news is that on the PPP side, it is a huge success. I haven't seen the updated numbers. The last I checked, more than $100 billion had been applied for. The program is $349 billion total. So that's where the bad news comes in. It looks like the PPP program could run out of money in the very near term. Some folks are saying that that's this week. Some folks are saying that that's next week. We're going to need Congress to act on that. That's very, very important. Last Thursday, Senator McConnell, the majority leader of the Senate, went to the Senate floor asking for unanimous consent to plus that money up to a full $600 billion. He asked unanimous consent, didn't get it. They have been working, the Republicans, Democrats, Secretary Mnuchin at Treasury have been working together to try and figure out a plan forward. Congress is out of town. They're out of DC. They're largely back at home. They're not expected to come back to DC until the end of May, barring some major events. So to get anything done, to get something to fix the PPP requires unanimous consent. It requires something getting done without a roll call vote. And we're going to have to see how that works out. As things stand now, it's still a standoff. McConnell is likely to come to the floor again tomorrow to ask for unanimous consent, and barring an agreement, which doesn't seem likely at this point, the PPP is still going to be at the $349 billion. A resolution is not there yet. There's also problems on the EIDL side. That program, Congress set aside $10 billion for loans up to $2 million per business. And as I said, there was $10 billion set aside. That program has largely been spoken for. And from what we've heard, SBA is telling people that they're going to get loans no bigger than $15,000. There's also the emergency relief provisions of the EIDL loan, where you can ask for an immediate grant that's supposed to be offered within 3 days, a grant of up to $10,000. So I think on the EIDL side, there have been some problems, but again, problems because both of these programs, small businesses have done a really good job of trying to get them. You know, if we would have been talking about this 2 weeks ago, we would have said Congress did their job of trying to come up with plans to get enough money into the small business sector, and that it would be up to us to make sure that small businesses were aware of these programs and took advantage of these programs. I think the problems that SBA and the banks are experiencing relates to just the tremendous need out there and the tremendous lack of bandwidth, particularly on the EIDL side. SBA doesn't have the bandwidth, no one could have, for just this deluge of applications. They're doing their best to work through some sorts of those kinds of things. One thing that I'm interested in hearing from you all is if anyone has gotten a PPP or an EIDL. From some of the other calls my colleagues and I have been doing over the last several days, some checks are starting to get cut. Money is starting to show up in people's accounts on the PPP side and also on the EIDL side. So I'd like to hear some more of that. So that's PPP and EIDL. We're also trying to figure out what the world is going to look like once this pandemic is in the rearview mirror a little bit. I'm sure that you got the email that my boss sent around, and if you haven't, I'll send it around to you, but sort of a plan of things that we're going to need to figure out for reopening businesses. And when I say we're going to need to figure it out, I mean it's the business community, it's Congress, it's the agencies, it's governors, it's community leaders. There's a lot of things that we need to get right, and we need to have an honest, thoughtful dialogue amongst a lot of players. So we've begun to do that. And in the following weeks, we're going to follow up with you all to continue to talk about that some more. But maybe at this point, the best thing that I could do would be to sort of take your questions, find out what's on your mind and what we can do to help. Again, like I said, we're in Washington to help. We're your advocates on the ground there. And we want to do everything that we can to sort of help you all out as a chamber, as a business community. So what kind of questions do you have at this point?
So far, I want to give our attendees an opportunity first, and then I'll come in from our side. Tara
Sure.
Wilson, she says she's received a deposit of $1,000 for the EIDL grant program today, but
Oh, wow.
she's seen discussions of both long and short forms, but she's only saw a short form. So what is the difference between those two?
So I haven't seen a different form for the EIDL. The only form that I saw, and to be honest, I haven't checked since maybe Friday or Monday, but I have only seen the one application on the EIDL. If you've already gotten a check of at least, you got $1,000 as part of the grant, I would expect that you're going to be okay, and that you at least filled out the right form. So that's what I think my answer is for that. There's not a lot of requirements on both the PPP side or the EIDL side. And SBA and the banks have a lot of flexibility in terms of what they're looking for. So to prove that you have an economic injury or to prove that you need emergency assistance, they have a lot of flexibility there. So I don't know about long form and short form there.
Okay. What are your expectations, or what do you think, or what has the U.S. Chamber seen, I guess, so far? I know you touched on it a bit, but where do you see phase 4, phase 5 going with the stimulus package as this 350 billion is essentially accounted for at this point?
So that's a really good question. And I don't have a really good answer at this point, but I think that history can be our guide a little bit here. If you look back at 2001, and if you look at the financial crisis in 2008, they're pretty good analogs for the circumstance that we're in now. There was a lot of crisis-related legislation that became law, and then there was a lot of recovery legislation that became law. The question that I think we're in right now is, are we still dealing with crisis, or have we started to move to recovery? At this point, it looks like we're probably still dealing with crisis. PPP and EIDL need more money. There's some other needs that are out there as well. So, and again, with Congress largely out of town, it's difficult to see how Congress passes, a big legislative package when one member can hold that up. So, sort of little nips and tucks, like getting additional money out there for PPP. I think that there's a broad consensus on the need to do that, maybe including some other things. But I would expect over the next several weeks, you see things like that occur. I don't see a scenario where PPP isn't plussed up in the next week or 2 or 3, something like that. Certainly before it goes out of money. I would be very, very surprised if that happens. There's broad agreement on the left and on the right that this needs to be addressed. Whether EIDL money is in there, I think is an open question, but I think that's also another issue that Congress would be relatively easy for Congress to address. And then issues, there's talk about something like infrastructure in a phase 4 or a phase 5 bill. There's a lot of issues that are out there. We're also probably going to have to deal with some head scratcher issues, like what kind of liability protection are businesses going to have once the government allows people to begin to go back to work? What are we going to need as the business community in terms of PPE and things like that? So those things of what we're going to need for recovery are starting to be thought about, but I don't have a clear sense of just when we're going to see those things. I don't think we're going to see big things, though, until sometime in June after Congress gets back in May. I think that would probably be the earliest, but again, it's going to be an open question. Regardless of that, even though we don't have certainty, we're going to continue to work together and let us know what we can do to make sure whatever problems there are and things that we can do to help, we want to be there for that.
Okay. We've, a number of our members have expressed concerns that they're being overlooked by some of their lenders because they don't meet a certain requirement of sorts, but they're looking for specific resources on additional information because there is so much out there. They don't know who to believe. We try and refer them to obviously our partners through the SBA, the U.S. Chamber, and our local government entities. Do you have any other suggestions as to who we can refer them to, just so they can get clear-cut information, or at least have them review more information?
So that's a really good question. I think that one of the things that we've heard is, for some of the online lenders like Cabbage and things like that, SBA is working really hard to make sure that they're capable to do some of these loans too. And a lot of, particularly on the small business side, a lot of folks just don't have a relationship with the bank in the same way, where some of the online folks might be better positioned to deal with this. And I think what you're talking about is more a question of uncertainty rather than anything else, because it's not a problem of information. It's a question of information about what the deal is with my loan.
Sure.
And two things out there. um, in less than 14 days, the government has had to deal with more than $100 billion in loan applications on the PPP. That is an enormous amount of money. That number is probably at 150 or whatever it is now. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money. The banks have done a relatively good job. And what I think the banks and SBA and Treasury have been really good at is trying to respond to problems when they occur. Initially there was a problem with Wells Fargo where, a lot of small guys use Wells Fargo, but Wells Fargo couldn't write the loans because of their consent decree, because of their previous bad action. That's Treasury work to address that situation. So I don't get the sense, and from all the stuff that we've seen, I don't get the sense that small businesses, even if you're really small and your requests are really small, are necessarily being overlooked. I think that, number one, it's a bandwidth issue. And then with some banks, it's a cognitive dissonance issue. What does a bank usually do? They come up with all the reasons for why they don't want to give you their money. Here, it's completely flipped on its head. Banks are said, just get this money out the door. And it's not even your money, it's our money. This is 100% backed by the federal government. And banks, I think, need some, bank executives, bank staff need some time to get comfortable with that. That's, I think, been a problem. I think you've heard the issue with some banks wanting to deal with their customers first. Some of the anecdotal reports are that the community banks have been better positioned to deal with this stuff than some of the national banks. I don't know that that's exclusive or the same across the country, but we've heard some of those reports. So I would say, continuing with SBA and Treasury, those two government websites have had the best spot on information. And uschamber.com/coronavirus, we've tried to keep updated with everything that we can. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Ron at the Chamber. I've been trying to post up as much new information whenever it comes out as well. So, but I think uschamber.com and the websites for SBA and Treasury are probably the best. I'm sorry I'm filibustering there a little bit.
No worries. One question in regards to chambers and trade associations. Early on, it became apparent that chambers of commerce 50C6 organizations are not recognized under the PPP plan. And we've been in communication with our local congressman about trying to get that adjusted for a future phase of a stimulus package. Have you guys had any thoughts on that? Because I believe we've signed on to a few letters that have come through our state chamber and stuff like that. Can you give a little bit more insight as to what you're hearing for those types of organizations? Some of the EDCs that are involved in our area as well are affected.
Yes. Number one, check your inbox later today because we're going to be sending out another coalition letter. Okay. Yes, C6s and other C organizations were specifically excluded from the PPP. It was our understanding that when the law was written, those organizations were eligible for the EIDL. SBA has been giving conflicting guidance depending upon the region of whether C6s and chambers are eligible for the EIDLs even. So we've been pushing really hard. So we did that big coalition letter. Earlier in the week, a coalition of dozens of Democrats and Republicans signed a letter to congressional leaders asking for C6s to be covered in the PPP. Senator Moran from Kansas sent a letter on Monday asking chambers to be included in the PPP. The entire New Jersey delegation signed on to a letter asking that C6s be included. And we're making another push. The best advice that I can give is exactly what you're doing. Talk to your member of Congress. Talk to both your senators too. I don't think that, particularly in your delegation, I don't think that there's anyone who's opposed to this issue. I think it's really important that we as chambers and other community organizations make it clear just how important this issue is. We've heard of chambers that have had to shut their doors or are worried about shutting their doors in a couple of weeks without assistance, and the people that they employ are important parts of their community and should be entitled to relief in just the same way. So we're working really hard. Talk to your members of Congress. We'll have this other letter for you to sign on later today.
Great, fantastic. Do we have any other questions from our members that are here in attendance? If so, I can either make everybody eligible to speak, or you can type the question in the Zoom chat and we can relay that to Ron. I'm gonna go ahead and allow everybody to talk so we can get everybody in if need. Are there any things on the docket that have yet to be announced or that are on the verge of being announced that we should be aware of in regards to either of these programs and how it affects our small businesses?
I don't think so. I think the biggest announcement that we're going to hear is when there's an agreement on PPP and EIDL, for additional funds there. I think members of Congress, the administration, were surprised at just how quickly both of these programs ran through what Congress set aside for them. So PPP was $350 billion. To put $350 billion in perspective, the entire payroll of the entire small business sector for a quarter is $700 billion. So $350 billion is an enormous sum of money. And I think everybody was surprised the degree to which that money has already been applied for. It's not out the door, but it's been applied for. I think as Americans, I think that we can be proud that Congress got this money out there as quickly as they did, and that they are looking as seriously as upping those programs and fixing this problem as quickly as the discussions are coming.
Okay. Well, I don't think there are any other questions. Obviously, we try to keep in contact with the information that you guys send out as much as possible, and we do relay to our members as often as we can. If you have any closing statements that you would like to make, feel free to make those. Otherwise, we will go ahead and conclude this webinar.
I just want to say thank you. Like I said earlier, we're all in this together. We're here to help you. Whatever we can do, please let us know. We think you're doing a fantastic job getting the information out to your members, keeping them informed. It's really our collective responsibility to make sure that small businesses are going to be there and be able to get back to work after the pandemic is in the rearview mirror. And the work that you're doing to make sure that happens for your members is really, really important. I'm sure that we'll talk again and maybe get together again in a week or two when we have some more information about return to work and some of the other issues that are out there. So thank you for the opportunity, and let's keep in touch.
I appreciate it, Ron. Thank you so much.
We'll catch you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.